Hello, fellow writers. I'm Lewis. That over there is Tolkien, and you have found the Scripturient Society.
Welcome back, everybody, to your favorite writing podcast. That over there is Karissa Harlow, aka Lewis. I'm your other host, Ash O'Rourke, aka Tolkien. We're both writers, both readers, both I was gonna say both conspiracy theorists. I don't know if that's true or if that's just personally me. I've been watching conspiracy documentaries and quite enjoying them.
I believe in some things people would probably find conspiracy theorists.
Or both a pseudo conspiracy theorist, possibly.
Yeah.
And today it looks like we're wearing opposite lip colors. It looks like you have like your like pretty glossy sheen on, and I've got like a red on. So it's so nice. Yeah, we did opposites. And I'm happy to say I moved my equipment into my bedroom. So if you guys are watching the video, you're like, what a messy bedroom. Okay, but what you should be paying attention to is the fact that the lighting is actually so much better for some reason. Like usually there's this like kind of yellowish shadow over my face. There's not that in this room, which is nice. It's not like amazing lighting, but it's so much better than the other room. So you guys are actually welcome.
Yeah, you're welcome for moving rooms. Also, there's a blanket with frogs in the background, which I think is pretty cool. I thought it was cacti at first, but as I was asking Ash what it was, my brain corrected and said, no, that's definitely an animal.
It is. My grandmother made that blanket for my brother when he was a baby. And then it became, over time, it became somehow like Shaylee's blanket, my mom's Great Dane. And then Shaylee passed away. And so the blanket was passed on to Brownie. Then Brownie doesn't really have a use for it. So it was passed on to Winchester, the other puppy. And Winchester threw up on it 3 times on the way to the vet last week. So it's washed now, thoroughly washed. That's why it's on the bed with some other laundry that needs to be put away. Yeah, I just tossed it.
I just bunched it up in a ball.
It was like, this will be fine. I'll just stick it on the bed for now. No, everything is actually quite clean comparatively. And we have, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you about my week, even though we haven't started. I'm just going to go for it because this week, finally, we are fixing the shower in like the master shower. I can't remember if I told you that it's been a nightmare. I think I have told you guys.
I don't know. Have you? I don't know. Remind me what was going on.
So basically we found a leak under the house and I was like, oh, the plumbing is leaking. No, what happened was the sellers of the property had done a bunch of stuff themselves around the property and on the house. And a lot of that was not really done correctly. And so they basically, we just layer by layer discovered more and more things that were insane. Basically, they had installed this massive shower in the master bathroom all by themselves. And everything, all the materials they picked were so heavy. It was like making the subfloor bend. And so then it was bending in the middle and then the grout was cracking. And so water was going through the grout. Yeah. So it wasn't really the plumbing. It was like somehow through the subfloor. And so that's been an experience. And so we chipped out manually all of the tile that was in there, only to discover a like 2-inch like pad of concrete that they had poured underneath it for some reason. And about an inch of grout underneath it, which isn't even where it's supposed to be. Right. So that was confusing. Plus on top of the whole thing, they had built a bench that they had attached to the wall on the floor, made with heavy tiles that are supposed to look like wood. And then the inside was full of actual pieces of wood, thick, heavy, waterlogged, mold-soaked wood that they had been like, this is fine.
Oh my gosh.
It was so gross. We were like wearing masks and trying to get rid of all the mold and everything. And anyways, and so Javi got back a couple days ago. So we were like, we're just going to finally knock out this shower. And so today we ended up putting down, we adhered the new tiles. And so then tomorrow we're going to put grout between all of them. And then I think the next day it might be ready to use, which would be fantastic. Because we've basically been sharing a shower with my mom at this little teeny little bathroom over there. We've been sharing that shower for weeks now. So, I mean, it's been like months, I think, since we used our shower. So I'm very excited.
Cool.
Yeah.
It is really funny. All of those things, they are absolutely the types of things that I would do thinking it would help and not realizing. Because you know how they say like some people are street smart and some people are like academic smart, like school smart. I'm so school smart that sometimes I cannot fathom like reality. It totally makes sense to me that someone would be like, you know what, just in case, an extra layer of grout underneath sounds safe. And like we should put wood just in case, you know,
just in case.
so many solutions I come up with are like, this makes total sense to me. And then people around me are like, what about this really obvious problem that would crop up? I'm like, yes, that.
Perhaps. That's so funny.
They sound like me.
Maybe just don't go into construction, and I think you'll be
Yes,
fine.
exactly.
Just, stay in an academic field.
Exactly.
I'm not like the most like construction handy, but I know some stuff. But I did like a lot of other stuff I can do by myself. I've done a lot of woodwork before, and like I can do lots of like outdoor manual stuff and building stuff. I've never retiled anything, and so I waited for Hobby to get back because I was like, listen, if one of us is gonna F this up, I don't want it to be me. And then it was something similar, like that was really obvious about tile that I just wasn't getting. And he's like, why don't you know that? And I was like, I have been very clear with you from the start. I know nothing about tile work. I know absolutely nothing. You want to talk about like building something else? Okay. Talk about like building something with wood. Let's chat. That's fine. But like, I've been very clear. I've given no impression that I have any idea what I'm doing.
Right.
So but thank God for him, because now we're going to have a shower back. If it was just me, I literally would have just had to save up money to pay someone to fix it. And it would have been very expensive. So yeah. Anyways, that's been pretty much my week. How's your week been?
It's good. On Saturday, I got to meet my other cousin's baby. I think I've talked about all of them. There are 3 babies right now of my cousins, and I got to meet the third one that I hadn't met yet. And she's 8 months old, and she's so cute. She's very small for her age, but like she's already crawling and rolling and has very good neck control. So you hold her and you're like, I have to be so careful. She's so small, and she's just like wiggling around, doing her own thing. Her neck is great. So
oh my God.
It's really great.
That is so exciting.
Yeah. So that was fun. And then my other cousin, who is like college age, he told us that he has a girlfriend, which is fun. And we got to meet her over the phone. So, big deal. And I mean, that's about it for like exciting things. We're walking the dogs now, and that's really exciting. And also there's this dog in our neighborhood that he's one of the, I don't know what breed he is, because I'm really bad at breeds. I'm really bad with breeds and cars, so I don't know. But he can jump higher than the fence, right? So when you're walking by, he'll jump and bark. He can also jump over the fence. So he jumped over the fence, ran at us, reached an invisible line, ran back to his house, jumped back over the gate, and then continued jumping. And I don't know why. Part of me wonders if like there's some kind of like a shot collar or some kind of situation going on. Like they create like invisible barriers or whatever.
Yeah, we've thought about doing those.
Yeah, but it's just, he was so naturally just like, whoops, that's as far as I can go. Bye.
I'll just return to what I was doing before, all this wasted effort aside.
Like, I just need my exercise, got to jump that gate a couple times a day. I don't know, but
that is
aside from that,
funny.
It's been very good. Yeah.
That's hilarious. There's a very, very mean German Shepherd who lives like a couple streets down, like right on where we want to go on a walk. Because my mom especially likes to go on walks, and this German Shepherd will not have it. He will. And here's the thing about country people, and I've never understood this, and I still don't understand this. And I've lived in the country, and I love country people, but I don't understand. They don't lock up their dogs. They just let their dogs wander. I have no idea. It kills me because first of all, I'm like, your dog's going to get hit by a car. And I'm like, second of all, if you have a dog that is not friendly under absolutely every circumstance with every kind of person and animal, that's a huge liability to just let your dog be roaming. And this German Shepherd is not nice. The house right before the German Shepherd's house, there's like 6 angry Chihuahuas, right? But they're Chihuahuas. So they were all running free. So they all came out and chased us on the road. And we were like, whatever, like bite my ankles. I don't care. And then we kept
I'm so much bigger than you.
Yeah, exactly. And then we kept walking, and then out comes this big, mean German Shepherd with his hackles up. And he came out to the middle of the road and just like stared us down, like ferociously growling and barking. And we were like, I guess we're turning around.
Yeah. Like, what do we do?
This is a public road, I get, but we can't go unless we were in a vehicle. We can't go this way. So anyways, it just drives me bananas. Like, I don't understand why country people let their dogs roam. It's very confusing. Especially because most of us have property out here. So I'm like, your dog has plenty of property. Okay. Right. They have need
space to run. They're fine.
Like miles to roam. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very confusing.
Yeah. I would be so worried they would get hit by a car.
Yes.
even when I'm walking them, I'm like, there's no physical way that the leash will reach the road, but I still tighten it. I'm still like,
Yeah,
just
you're
come a
still
little
like,
bit more.
what if they try to dive out in front of a car? Like, what if they do
Right.
something stupid like that? Yeah. And Brownie's gotten out twice total since we've been here. And both times I've been like, she's going to get hit by a car because she's so stupid. Like, I'm just like 100% sure. Like, I love her, but I'm like, you have no common sense. You're going to get whacked by a car. And the people like in the country also tend to like, it's so funny because like, we all know there are animals out here on the roads. Like we see deer, sometimes people's cows get out in the roads. There's random stray cats and then all the random country dogs, but people will still book it around all these curves and corners, and they'll drive in the middle of the road. And you're like, you don't own this road.
Other people live here.
Other people live here with their animals, and the animals are dumb. Yeah. So anyways, that's some of the joys of country life. Pretty much the only negative. Everything else is positive. Some people say they don't like being so far from the city. I love that. So that's also a positive for me.
Yeah, it depends on the kind of person you are.
Yeah, exactly.
I would never want to live in a big city. I'm pretty suburbia. That's my jam. So
yeah. Yeah, I grew up in suburbia. It was too many people for me. People are like, you go days and days without seeing people. And I'm like, yeah, it's amazing.
It's true.
It's a dream come
Suburbia true. Is like you can lock yourself away in your house and not see people. But also if you were to get attacked or suffer some kind of heart attack, there are people close enough to you.
Exactly. It is a very good compromise. When you live in the city, you have to see people and you have no choice. Yeah. But yeah, in the suburbs, you can choose whether or not you want to see people. Out here, we have to go out of our way to see people.
Right.
Yeah. Anyways, anything else from your week you want to share?
No.
All right, sweet. Well, do you have any book recs this week?
I do. I actually have a book rec. I'm reading I assume it's just called the Talon series or the Talon Saga by Julie Kagawa. It's the one about dragons.
Ooh.
You'd probably recognize the cover. It has like the red scaly cover with the word Talon in the middle.
Ooh.
It's so 2010 in the best way. Like I'm only like about halfway through the first book, but everything in it, I'm like all the tropes, all of the dialogue, everything. I'm just like, this is so 2010 in the best way.
Yeah.
And I'm just having a lot of fun with it. It's just very refreshing, I guess. It's kind of like a little bit of a time warp, you know?
Ooh,
you're like, because I mean, they were published a while back, but
is it middle grade or YA?
It's YA.
Yeah,
but like the main character is a dragon and they like live in secret, so they take on human disguises and like have to learn how to blend in with the rest of us. And
that sounds amazing.
Then there are dragon hunters and they're hunting them down, so they have to pick out which of the humans is faking and try to kill them. And it's very interesting so far. And I think I don't know how many books it is, but I'm excited. So
I'm excited for you. That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, so I would recommend. It's very fun.
God, I love 2010 YA fantasy.
It's so good. And a lot of people have been talking about dragons, like on TikTok, dragons are the thing. And really, aside from Aragon, I don't know a lot of books with dragons. So this has been really fun.
I wrote one when I was probably like 13 or 14. I got pretty far in it. And I still think it's an excellent concept for like, it's really more of a middle grade. I thought it was a YA at the time. It's more of a middle grade, but it's still an excellent idea.
Yeah.
Maybe so I'll do it again.
I like the dragon thing. I think dragons are hard to do well because of the whole shapeshift to human thing. You got to come up with a good reason. But like in this one where they're blending in on purpose to survive, it's very cool. It works. So I like it. Sweet. What have you been reading?
Well, I've been reading a few different things, but I'll give you guys the book rec. Ironically, that I haven't actually started this week, but by the end of the week I will have reread, but I've read it many times. It is The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde.
Yes.
It is actually a play. Yeah. Yes. It's a play, not a book. So that means that it's short, which is the great news, but it is hysterical. It is hysterically funny. It is the best comedy ever written. I love it so much. So you guys should all go read it or at least watch the movie or go see it on stage. It's so funny on stage. It is so good. So that's my pseudo book rec for you guys.
Yeah. Do plays count as books? I would think they do because you read them. Yeah. Like seeing a play wouldn't, but reading a play would. So
yeah, I think so. I think it just depends. Like if I went to see a play, I wouldn't count it as reading a book, but if I've read the play, I think that counts. Like we do that with Shakespeare. Those are also meant to be seen. Yeah. But that's my book rec. What about our word of the week?
All right. Our word of the week is half-pace. The landing of a staircase between two flights or stories, or the landing at which you must turn to take a second flight to the next floor. So like on a staircase, it's the space between staircases. It has a name, right? My mind was blown when I discovered this. I was like, I'm going to use that word all the time. And I do. And no one ever knows what I mean until I tell them. But
yeah. And they're like, well, now I know what to call it. Okay. Yeah. I get why some words fall out of use because we don't use them that much, but like stuff like fortnight, which is 2 weeks, and half-pace. Yeah. These are extremely useful.
Yes.
Why did
it's one word for a series of words?
Yes, for literally trying to describe like a vague concept. Mm-hmm. Why has this word fallen away? I feel so uneducated.
Oh, yeah, because it's like, so the dogs will sit on the half-pace of our stairs. And they're always like, where are they? I'm like, well, they're on the half-pace. And it's so useful.
It's like, otherwise you're like, they're on the platform. They're on the
stairs, but they're not.
Flights of stairs. Where the 2 flights of stairs, there's a little floor piece there. That's where they are.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about?
We could just be saying the half-pace this whole time instead of over here looking like an idiot trying to describe it.
That's a singular word for it. So I would really love, of all the words of the week so far, this is the one I would really like to bring back into regular usage because it is so useful. I mean, if you live in an apartment complex, if you work in an office building, if you're in a 2-story house, if you have an attic or a basement, basically all of those things will have half-paces.
Yes.
So
or if you ever walk on one. Yes. If you ever walk on one or look at one or have to talk about one. This is ridiculous. Or see one. Now you'll know what it's called. Yeah. Oh, look, what a beautiful half-pace over there.
Right? I'll wait for you on the half-pace of the such and such building,
Yes. I cannot believe, I'm like genuinely frustrated that this word has fallen out of use. And we absolutely, I agree. Of every word, this is the one that would be the most useful to bring back. Mm-hmm. We're definitely going to bring back half-pace.
So everyone, if you're listening, it is now your responsibility to use the word half-pace.
Spread the word, quite literally spread the word. Half-pace is the word. Spread it out. Get everyone to use it.
Yep.
No more vaguely trying to describe that weird in-between platform between the flights of the stairs.
Help the people around you and teach them this word.
Exactly.
Illuminate their minds.
Be a humanitarian.
Exactly. Do a good deed. Come on.
Yeah. Come on. Anyway, should we get into the theme for this episode?
Yeah. So we're going to talk about book series. Everyone loves series, and specifically short versus long series, and what the pros and cons of each are. So first off, where do you count the difference between short and long? Because I'll let you answer.
I think short is like 2 to, it depends, because I feel like 2 to 3 is short. I feel like if they're not super long books, you could get away with having 4 and it could feel like a short series. I think any more than 4 books and it feels like a long series. And if they're all long books, then 4 books feels like a long series. Yeah. So somewhere between 3 and 4 is your safe. It shifts from a short series to a long series. Anything below 4 is a short series.
And everything above is long. 4 is questionable.
4 is, it's the gray area. Yeah. It fully depends. I don't know. What do you think?
I would totally agree. That's what I was going to say. I think trilogies and then obviously duologies would be short, and then everything else is long, which seems like you would get the bulk of series being long, but so many series are duologies and trilogies. So it probably evens out, if not errs on the side of short series as being more popular.
So. I love duologies also. Those are not as popular as they should be. Everything is like a trilogy, it feels like, or a longer series. And I am just advocating for more duologies, you guys. Like, so nice.
There was the whole age of trilogies. Like basically everything was a trilogy from like, I don't even know when it started. It's like 2012. Everything was a trilogy.
I know.
And then duologies came out. And I was like, this is stupid. Why wouldn't you just keep it at 3 books? But the problem with trilogies so many times was that book 2 was a filler book. And that problem is erased with duologies.
With duologies, that is exactly correct. That's exactly
I do love
correct.
them now.
And it's also kind of like, if I read a standalone and I really like a standalone and I want more of it, then I'm sad that there's not more. But sometimes three or plus books can be like, oh, well, that's a big commitment. But a duology is just the right amount that you wanted more of a book without like a huge commitment. So it's much less intimidating than saying, I'm going to read this 3, 4, 5, or 6, 7, 8 book trilogy. Okay, when we are getting past 5 books, you have to have a very good reason.
That's true. I mean, Ash, I love long series. So I feel what you're saying, but also I love it so much. You have to have enough of a world and a plot and characters that are likable enough to make it work. Like
you have
Harry
to
Potter
really,
or
exactly.
A lot of middle grade. Percy Jackson.
Yeah, Percy
I'm trying to think of an adult series that does that. The Soulless series, which I've talked about before by Gail Carriger, does that really well. But the world has to be enough and the characters, and you have to have enough plot things going on. You can't just have filler books with the characters doing nothing or causing stupid drama, unless it's a series like specifically about drama. You can't fill it in. It has to, every book has to be its own masterpiece.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do.
Kind of did like a pseudo. She gave you both options because you can kind of read all of her books in the Grishaverse. You could kind of view them as a series. They kind of feel like a series, but they are like individual enough storylines, even though they're all interwoven. The storylines are individual enough. You can be like, the Six of Crows duology, the Shadow and Bone trilogy. And then I forget what the other ones are called, but I haven't read them yet because I know I'm going to be obsessed with them. So
Rule of Wolves. I don't know what the series is called,
Rule of Wolves. Yeah, exactly. So she kind of did it. But if she had been like, I'm going to have 8 books in a series, I probably would have been like, I'm sorry, but I'm not reading an 8-book series. Now, if you want to, it's kind of like when you're like, no, I'm not going to watch a movie, but I'll watch like 5 like 1 hour
TV
episodes.
show, but for like 10 hours. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of a similar concept where I'm like, I'm not going to read an 8-book series, but will I read 3 different series of a like duology, trilogy? Absolutely. I will. 100%.
I feel that. Cassandra Clare did something kind of similar in The Mortal Instruments where it's 3 books, but it's also 6 because the bad guy changes halfway through. So you could read the original trilogy and be good, but then you can also go on to 4, 5, and 6. So.
I think that's nice. I think if you're going to do more than 5 books, I think somewhere within that series, it would be very kind of you to include like a kind of natural breaking point. So somebody can put the series down, feel satisfied, and still come back for more if they want it, but not feel like, well, I'm frustrated and I'm not going to read 3 more books. I don't have time to read 3 more books. I don't want to wait for 3 more books to come out. I just feel like it's very kind of you. Also, that's a lot of books, okay? Like 5 or more books is a lot. Like there should be some really big resolutions happening at that point in your story. So there should be some kind of natural breaking point, even if you haven't resolved everything. Just definitely something to keep in mind.
Yeah. Well, I think too, in like, so my series is more than 5. My series that I've written is 9 books.
I know it is.
But I do think a key to that is maybe don't do cliffhangers. Like you're saying, I don't know if every book is going to be like, okay, you can stop now, because you do want to, give people incentive to read the next book. And the whole point of having a series is that you can't do it in one book. Hopefully you're not just arbitrarily splitting it up. So it's like each book really should be building on the ones before. But maybe fewer cliffhangers. Like you really need to resolve stuff so that readers, because you do want to be fair to readers in that regard, because especially as people get older, and this is less of a problem for YA, I would think, because probably the bulk of your audience are teenagers who are in school and have the time maybe to spend on it. But when adults are reading it, I have noticed that a lot of adults I know don't like reading long series because it's such a time commitment. And it can be, especially when there's like a year between releases, it just gives you so much time by book 9 to have forgotten what went on in book 1. Whereas book 3, you probably still kind of remember what happened in book 1, even if it's been a year between each. So that's a problem, but I still really like long series.
Well, some people do, and there's definitely a market for it. And I don't think that I think every book should have a cliffhanger except for the last one, but it's like more like the enormity of the cliffhangers, or really like the enormity of the things that are resolved. So like if you're going to do something really long, then maybe around book 4 or 5, if you're going to have like a 5+ book series, then maybe around book 4 or 5, you resolve one of the biggest conflicts that's been going from the start, but there's still another even bigger conflict. And that's how people want to keep reading. reading, but you've still resolved the really big conflict. So it doesn't feel like, why have I dedicated so much time and energy to this very long series? But it also is just like a personal taste thing. Like I do like shorter books, like and I like things that are concise and less wordy. And that's like always been my preference. So a lot of that is preferential too. But like Game of Thrones also, like it blows my mind that people read these books, because not only is the series long, the books are so long, each individual book. So that's a huge ass commitment. And there are people who are here for it. There are people who will totally read it. But it's another thing where like you want to keep your market in mind. And you also have to keep in mind that like fewer really long series tend to become extremely successful. So maybe there's a slightly smaller market for it, but that's comparative. It's still a big market. It's just considerably smaller than the market for probably duologies and trilogies, or even standalones, because at least if your audience, if you want it to be like new adult, for example, because like Karissa said, like middle grade can be pretty long series and kids dig it. And I definitely read a lot of those that were really long because I had plenty of time. Even like YA, I had a lot more time. And so a longer series didn't intimidate me as much. But if you're expecting to write for new adults and adults, then a longer series might not be as much to your benefit, because you might have a harder time drawing in an audience. So maybe that's where you pull something like Lee Bardugo, where you have like multiple series that are all connected, but there's a lot of very natural stopping points in between. I think that might be more successful if you're writing for new adults or adults. But other than that, you have a little more wiggle room.
Yeah. Also, if you're writing for new adults and adults, if the series can be read out of order, or if the plot isn't like inherently entwined. So like Agatha Christie, right? You don't have to read the Poirot books in order, or, all of them. You can skip around, you can do whatever you want, because they don't have to be read in a certain order. It is technically a series, and there is a chronology to things that go on, but not to the extent where you have to be like on top of it and remember what happened in previous books. So like murder mystery type of things. I don't know, certain types of contemporaries. Maybe if it's like, they'll do like a family of people and then each one gets their own romance in a different book. And that's technically a series. You don't have to read all of them. So that can also work for
when it's like
older
episodic.
markets.
Yeah, absolutely. Like episodic stuff. Like that's what we were watching Castle last night with my mom.
Yeah.
We wanted to introduce Caleb, and we wanted to also start from the episode where I was watching with her. And he was like, well, do I need to watch like the first episode to understand? And we were both like, not really, because it's episodic, which is also what I like about Castle, is that it's like not a huge commitment. Like I don't have to like remember a bunch of what has happened to have context. And I can, in fact, that's why I watch it so much, is because my goldfish brain doesn't feel any tension at all. It's just like, catch and
remember 1 hour.
Yeah, exactly. And then the next episode, I'm like, what happened last episode? I don't know. And it doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
And I love it.
This is also why I liked the first several seasons of Supernatural more than I liked the later seasons, because it got way too, like, I liked the monster of the week format. And then it got into like each season is its own plot. And like, this is totally different. Please go back.
I know. I agree. I didn't finish Supernatural because of that reason, was because now I'd have to go back and rewatch so much stuff, because I don't remember, because there was so much you suddenly had to remember to understand what was happening, which is how you know that it is not episodic anymore. I'm having that issue with, I'm reading Winter right now, in Marissa Meyer's series, and this is actually a really good example of kind of what we were talking about, where it's a 4-book series. Well, kind of, like there's like prequels and other stuff too,
4 main books.
It's essentially a 4-book series. And it feels really long, and it's because each book is pretty long. Where another series, I might say $4 and be like, nothing. But like this one, I'm having a really hard time remembering, especially in Winter, everything from the last 3 books, which are slightly more episodic, but there is a continuing plot line throughout. So if you haven't read them all in order, you do miss like a significant amount of the book. You don't understand a significant amount of the book. And so now reading Winter, I'm having such a hard time remembering what's happened in the last 3 books. So this is, and it's so good. And I love this series so much. And I love the characters and I love the writing, but that's an example of a series that is 4 books but does cross the line, I feel like, into being considered a long series.
Right. Yeah. And I think when you're writing, you do have to keep that in mind. Like, you're never going to know exactly how long it'll take, but the space between books being released and or the space between readers just choosing to pick up the books can
Mhm.
be a really enormous factor in how enjoyable it
Yes.
is and how much you remember. Because too, if you don't have cliffhangers, and again, I think lack of cliffhangers can be a good thing in long series, but if
Mhm.
you don't have them, people might not feel motivated to pick up the
To keep
next
reading.
one super early. They might come back to it
Mhm.
5 years later and then think,
Yes.
wait, I don't remember anything. I don't know what's going on.
Mhm.
So
That
you
is what
kind of
I
want to
do.
give them, yeah, you want to kind of give them something at the end to say, read the next one ASAP,
Yeah. Yep.
just to kind of encourage that so that they don't end up in a situation where they can't remember.
Or they can't
Um,
remember anything. Yeah.
yeah. But because I don't know, I just remember, being young, like you were saying, all the like middle grade series and stuff are really long. Like the Sisters Grimm series that I loved was 9 books,
Yeah.
and Fablehaven was 5, and Percy Jackson was 5. And it was so fun
Yes.
to wait on the next release, right? You'd
Yes, it
read the
was.
first or second, and then you'd be like, oh my gosh, the third one is coming out next year. I'm so excited. And you can
Yeah.
anticipate it. And like back then, you'd like go to the bookstore and get it when it came in. Now you can order it online.
Hmm.
And it was just such a fun experience. And so I kind of like doing that now,
Yeah.
where you kind of track when the next book in the series is coming out and you buy it, as immediately as you can.
Yeah.
But when I don't know, maybe this is a being older thing or just times have changed, but your TBR gets so big and there's so many books being released that you want to read probably,
Hmm.
that it can be difficult to pick which ones to really loyally follow.
Yes, it
So
can.
I just think lack of cliffhanger, but something prompting the reader to
Mhm.
want to read on like right away
Yeah.
is a really good place to be, because it's middle ground. They're not going to be upset by the cliffhanger.
Yeah.
They're not going to, be angsty about it and then like
Yes.
revenge stop reading, but they're also going to be
Yeah.
motivated to continue reading, because
Yeah.
that's something I
Middle
do
grade
if
does that
I
really
don't like
well.
cliffhangers. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, I
middle
get
grade
that.
does.
Middle grade does it because most middle grade books, especially like Percy Jackson, like you have one really big conflict and like one
Mhm.
villain, like one primary antagonist per
Yeah,
book. And so at the end of that book, it gets resolved. But
right,
then we get the end of every book, we get kind of a hint of this like overarching like conflict that's going on. So it's not
right.
this like massive cliffhanger, I think, until later in the series. Like it's not like, and then the earth fell apart or something
Yeah,
at the end of the book. It's like, and everyone kind of had a feeling that things weren't over yet. It's
right.
like
It's kind of
still,
eerie.
it kind of feels like a cliffhanger, even though there
Mhm.
hasn't been like an event to catapult us into a cliffhanger,
Yeah.
which you can do. But I mean, the way that middle grade tends to do that is so satisfying. And I think
Mhm.
if you're going to do a long series, is not a bad idea to try and emulate that, at least
Yeah.
until you get like through most of your books. When you get closer to the end of your series, I feel like that those are probably your most committed readers that have gotten
True.
there. So you can do a little less of that. You can do a little more like suddenness. Like I think book 4, Percy Jackson, actually had a pretty hardcore cliffhanger, if I'm remembering correctly. Like it wasn't as much resolution as with the others. But
Mhm.
those of us who had read all the way through book 4 are obviously going to read book 5. Like you don't typically
Right.
get to the book before the last book in a series and then be like,
And then give
I
up.
don't know what happens, especially not with a long series. And then
Yeah.
also if you have a little bit of freedom in that sense where you don't have to do as much recap, which is kind of
Yeah.
another thing to think about. Like it's not just how you end a book in a short versus long series. You also have to think about how you start the books in your series. Like if you're
Mhm.
doing a shorter series, then people might not be as committed to the series. So you might need to do a little bit more of a recap or include a
Right.
little more context for the book before. If you're doing a really long series, yes, you need to do that with like the second, third, maybe even fourth book.
Mhm.
I would say fourth and fifth books and on, you kind of in a series no longer need to do the same level of like
Yeah.
recap, because those are your loyal readers who have been
Mhm.
with you. They understand. Like
True.
definitely include a little bit of context in case they put down the series and come back to it later, but nowhere near does that context need to be on the level of in a duology or trilogy, the type of recap that you do, just so
Mhm.
people can remember. Like it's a lot less work for recap when you hit like the midway through a longer series. And I
Mhm.
think it's more work for recap for a shorter series.
Yeah. I agree, because that's one of the like pros for long series and cons for short, is that you get so much more invested because of all of the time you've spent on it. I mean, you
Yeah.
can certainly hardcore love a standalone or duology or trilogy, but
Mhm.
I just feel like, like look at the difference in Harry Potter versus Hunger Games. I mean, Hunger Games
Yeah.
was huge, but Harry Potter was bigger.
Yes,
And
it
I
was.
think it's at least partially because there were more books. You had more years of people's lives spent anticipating them and waiting for them and getting really into them, talking about them. And then you got more time with all the characters and you got more about the world. And so, you know, there are theme parks, and there's a reason that a 7-book series can produce that where maybe a trilogy can't, because there's so much more world building.
I think that's very true.
Yeah. And when this is kind of a separate point, when you are like ending your books like in the long series versus the short series, like I said, cliffhangers work better for short series, but each installment of that longer series should really be feeding into the ultimate end, so that by the time you get to like book 6, 7, 8 or whatever, book 1 was still important, not like a throwaway thing. That's a really hard thing to kind of keep up in a really satisfying way. You don't want to start out with a really strong premise in book 1 that then kind of goes away by the end,
because just abandon it.
Yeah, you want to make sure that you have a premise that really goes through. So I don't know, I'm thinking about my series, right? And I of course know what happens, and everything in the series is really building up to that end point of the defeat of the bad guy. And it's like, you really need this whole journey to find out how, because I did a lot of really intricate world building, and that's not going to be for everyone. And I understand that, but for people that really like that, I feel like it's more satisfying in a longer series to see that payoff. And it's also a lot more pressure to make the payoff really worth it. This is something I was noticing too in standalones and duologies in particular. The ending can be less climatic and still as satisfying. Whereas in long series, you have to have some kind of epic battle.
You have to bring it.
You need a plot twist at the end that changes everything. Or, I mean, you got to have more character deaths, probably. That's what I think. You have to do more. It has to be bigger. And that is its own pro and con, because awesome when pulled off well. That's why I like long series, because I think that ultimately done well is so much better. But oh boy, if you do it badly, is that really disappointing? Whereas a duology can stand that.
The stakes are extremely high in a long series to make that final climax, like, because it's not just the climax of the book, it's the climax of the series. So it's like on a whole other level. And when you do a duology or a trilogy, it's not the same. Like, it's not the same level of pressure on it by far. You don't have to
build to it in the same way. It can be a duology can be 2 separate plots with the same characters. A series can't really, it can, but if you're trying to feed it in and make it like a chronological plot, it really has to build. Each book has to build on the ones that came before. It doesn't necessarily have to in shorter series.
Exactly. I would say this is also where, if you're writing a short, if you guys don't like to outline or don't like to go back and kind of like reverse outline a book, if you just, that's not your strength, you hate doing it, I would caution you to think first if you're going to write a long series, because if you are someone who hates outlining and hates reverse outlining, it's like pulling teeth to do it. Stick with a standalone or duology or a trilogy, or even a standalone or duology if you really hate it, because for a long series to be convincing and to have that really, really impactful climax of the last book that it has to be successful, you have to have that to satisfy your readers. So to have that, you have to have been building the whole time. So not only do you need to have, outlined and or reversed outlined each of the individual books in a series, you have to outline and reverse outline the entire series.
So that means
the whole plot. And so that means if you're publishing as you go, you don't have that much freedom to go back in and try and like make it so everything you wanted to happen is connected to begin with. Like, you are a lot more limited. So you had better sit down and plot out all the big things that need to happen in your series if it's going to be a long one. You have a little more freedom if it's a duology or a trilogy, because like Karissa said, like, you just haven't been leading up to something for as long. So you can kind of get away with it. I think it's always better if you've done some thorough outlining or reverse outlining like before publishing, especially if you know that'll be, 2 or 3 plus books. It'll be anything more than a standalone, but you can get away with doing less of it for a duology or trilogy. Anything more than that, guys, you will rue it. Your readers will rue it. It will make it so much harder to write an impactful climax in the last book. So even so, just for the sake of the last book in your series, do it. outline the whole series. Also, it gives you some kind of direction and motivation and ongoing themes and stuff for, the rest of the series, which is good because you should have that. So that's where, I know that outlining is really hard for a lot of us, including me, but guys, you can't skip it. Like you can wait to do it later, but if you're writing as you go in a long series, that approach is a little more limited. Like trying to go backwards and trying to reverse outline a whole series is kind of impossible if you publish as you go. So if you're gonna do a long series, just know you might have to do the work of outlining beforehand, because we talk a lot about like either outline or go back and reverse outline when you finish the book. Because both of us, I think, tend to be more pantsers than plotters. So you can't really do that with a long series. Like you do at some point after like book 1 or 2, really have to sit down and go, where is the series going? There's no other option. You can't reverse outline that. You have to do the actual from the start outline.
Yeah, it's why it always makes me kind of nervous on like Instagram and TikTok. Authors will talk about how, I just wrote book 1 and I don't really know where it's going, but I'm excited. And I'm always like, what do you mean you don't know where it's going? What if you need to change things in book 1 in order for that ending to work? And I don't know, people make it work, I guess, but I do think the best series that are the most satisfying are ones that had a plan at some point. It might not be page 1, but at some point there was a plan. Yes. And in long series, there are more details to keep straight. You want to make sure you're not contradicting yourself in, how people are aging. More time is probably going to pass. You don't want your characters to stay 17 years old for 9 books straight. That's unless it's all really happening in
very, very quickly,
rapidly, but that's unlikely. A lot of series that go on for a long time are usually years, like Percy Jackson, Harry Potter, that kind of stuff. But
that's true.
There's a lot more to keep straight, and it is more work. I guess my opinion, and you can decide if you guys agree or if Ash agrees or anything, is long series when done well are better than short series done well, but short series are easier to do well. And so they end up being more satisfying more often.
I would agree. I would totally agree. But so it's hard because when you think about it, like just like a quick like flash thinking about it, you're like, well, that's not true because there's more duologies and trilogies that are better because of that exact thing. Because when done well, exactly. A longer one is always better when done well, but it's so hard to do. And like you said about the Harry Potter thing, the Percy Jackson thing, all the series that get really big are what I would consider long series. So it's true. Like the world wants them done well, but dang, it is hard. It is so much harder to do that well. So if you guys think that you can't do it well, because it's also like Karissa mentioned before, a huge technical commitment because you can't contradict yourself. You can't.
The details are always in my brain. I'm constantly thinking like, was that a plot hole? And it's like one thing one person said once. I'm like, I have to change it.
Exactly.
It's so many details.
It's so many details. So if you cannot commit to the details and the technicality and the organization that goes with a long series, don't do it. I know you're like, but it would be better if it was the best. But yes, that's the whole problem. That's the thing. So like, if you can't commit to that, that's perfectly fine. Better to write a really spectacular duology or trilogy than a kind of mediocre or full of plot holes or missing details long series, because that one will never be that successful anyways. So, I mean, just know what your capabilities are. And if you have an idea that you're like, I really want to do this and it has to be a long series, but you don't think you can commit the effort and, or you don't know if you have the skill for it yet, put it on a back burner, work on it later or work on it little by little, like pick something else. If you're like, I just want to get something done so I can query it out and I've got some other ideas, like you just have to be very sure of yourself, I feel like, to pull off a long series effectively.
Yeah. Particularly if you feel anywhere near publishing, like you can try your hand at it whenever you want. But if you're like, I really want to give this a real try, I'm going to see if I can publish. I don't know that I would say you have to start with a standalone or a short series, but starting with a long series will be more of a time commitment and you have to be willing to do that. It's more, I feel like it takes up more space in my brain.
It's more of an effort commitment.
Yeah. Cause like Ash and I have talked about this. Ash has written a lot of books over her life because I think they all tend to be shorter series. Whereas I have one in my head that I've been working on for so long.
Well,
and I've branched out a little now.
I think you've probably written the same amount of books about, well, I think you've surpassed me now because you've been writing so much recently, but I think before that we'd written like the same amount of stuff pretty much, but mine were like, you know, a standalone or a trilogy or another trilogy. And then yours was like this whole 9-book like beast of a series. So like same amount of writing, but like she has spent years of her life. Like that is the type of commitment you have to have for a long series. I don't have that. I don't have the memory for it. You guys are not new here, probably, I'm hoping. And so if you've been here for even more than an episode, you know, my goldfish brain can't do it. A long series would be very, very, very difficult for me to pull off. I don't know if I'll ever be able to pull it off. What am I working on now? I'm trying to think of anything I have. One of my ideas now could be a long series, but I don't know if it will be yet. I'm trying to give myself the potential, but I don't know if I can do it. And so if I write book 1 and I go, nope, there's too much detail in this world for me to pull this off and remember everything for more than 3 books, then I'm not going to do it, because I'd rather have a good trilogy than like kind of like half-assed longer series. Yeah.
And this isn't to say that like duologies and trilogies aren't also awesome. I mean, of course, you know, the Hunger Games, you have most of Cassandra Clare's stuff. You have, if you want to count like Shadow and Bone and Six of Crows as separate things, of course, they are so good. Cassandra Clare and Leigh Bardugo have the whole same world, different stories thing going on, which is kind of a nice happy medium.
Nick and I might do something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of solves all the problems where the series are short, but the world is rich. Yes. But I have been noticing lately in a lot of duologies, in particular that I've been reading, there is something really satisfying about a smaller, more focused world also. And I mean, we've been talking a little more about fantasy, probably just by accident. But I mean, this goes for sci-fi, murder mysteries, dystopian, all that kind of stuff. If your characters or your world are smaller, they're kind of contained in a smaller environment, that leaves a lot of room to do different things than a long series. The series is coming to mind as Fable, right? The duology by Adrienne Young, because I thought that was really well done. The world building was really cool, but it was more deep than broad, if that makes sense. And so I think that's where kind of the strength of the duology and trilogy come in. Not that long series aren't deep, not that duologies and trilogies can't take place in really broad worlds, but it's just when you're trying to focus, if you're trying to make a very particular point, or if you're focusing on one very particular world building point, because like in Fable, there's really only one type of magic. So and it's kind of like pseudo magic. It's not, I don't even really know what to call it, but it's so focused that doing 3-4 books would, like, what would you even talk about? You know, there's almost nothing there. And so that can be really good. So I'm not saying I think long series are superior just because of my personal preference, but I'm not saying that as like an objective statement. Right. So yeah. And then also with long series, this is something I talk about a lot when it comes to theme. You have to pick a theme that can really run the entire series, because you don't want to end up contradicting yourself, and it all has to feel in atmosphere and thematically like a series. So you want to pick something that you can go on about for a while. You can have smaller themes in there too, but you also have to pick one that you can go on about for a while. Whereas in shorter series, you can kind of pick something and it can be smaller or it can be bigger and you're focusing in on it. Thematically, I think it's also important to keep that straight.
I totally agree. If you picked a theme that you could describe to somebody in like 20 seconds or less, like not doing your like really good, like summarized query letter version, like you just actually can convey all of your thoughts about a theme in about 20 seconds, that's probably not a theme that can carry you through a really long series. Now, if it's a theme that you could like go on about for like half an hour, hours,
you have a thesis,
you have a whole thesis on this theme, then that is a theme that you could pull out through a whole series. So you also just need, and it doesn't mean that one of those themes is more important in general than the other. It just means that one is more suited to a long series and one isn't. And trying to drag one out or try to make one shorter than it needs to be to convey the theme is never going to work. It's that conciseness thing again. You want to be absolutely as concise as you can always, even in a long series. That's why the series that are really long, that are really effective, tend to, I think, be pretty concise concise. I mean, I'm not going to say anything about Game of Thrones because that just blows my mind. I haven't read it, but I don't get the idea that it's concise, but who knows? But the idea of writing with conciseness is the whole Ernest Hemingway thing. Like you say a lot by saying a little. And so if you can do that, and it means that you're writing in that style, makes your story a shorter series, do it. If you are doing that and you are still writing more and more and more, that is perfectly fine. Guess what? You've got like the perfect long series going. You have the perfect excuse to do a long series. But there's no, like, I also used to think like that a trilogy was like the accepted like number of books.
Yeah.
There is absolutely no reason that you need to try to force your story to be longer or shorter than it naturally is. Same with word count. I know that it's really hard because with word count, we want to be like, oh, I want to reach like 75,000 word or whatever. That's like the YA average. There is absolutely, I get it. From a publishing perspective, people are looking for an average type of word count. From a storytelling perspective, I strongly believe use whatever words you need to tell your story, no more, no less. A publisher can pick the fight with you over that at that point. But I just think that we all care a lot too much about how many books are in the series, how many word count it's going to, how big the word count is going to be, or how small the word count is going to be. Just do what it takes to tell your story effectively without wasting your breath. I think that that's the most effective way to craft a story that's compelling. And that will show through if you query it out. And a publisher will say, hey, we love this, but it needs to be shorter, it needs to be longer. And so that then at that point, you can work with that from there. But there's no point because you're going to have to do it anyways. So
True.
There's no
do
point.
what you want up front.
Yeah, do what you want up front and just be willing to compromise when it comes to publishing, because that is the compromise you make. Publishing is that you have to go, okay, like my over 100,000 word fantasy novel as my premier publication, the publisher might ask that I cut 20,000 of those words, which feels like a lot. But guess what? You can cannibalize that content and use it later. You can use it for bonus material. You could put it in another book. You could do short stories. You can still use it. So don't panic about that. But so this was also what I ran into with my only adult book that I've written that was like magical realism. It ended up being like 50,000 words, which for me was so short. But I was like, is there anything else I can add? And at this point, I was like, no, there's not.
This is the story.
This is the whole story. Anything else I write in this would be fluff. And so I would have a very hard time if a publisher told me to add to it. I'd be like, add what? Like, I'd be like, I need you to tell me what you think would make this story better. Like, I'd have to workshop it. I'd have to have other readers go over it. Like, I would have to really try to search out something else that would be compelling enough to add. And hopefully I could find something. But I for right now, the story, as far as I know, is completely done. There's nothing else to tell. And so I just had to accept that it's 50,000 words, which gave me a lot of anxiety until I was like, wait, that's good. That's good that it only has what it needs.
Give you anxiety, especially because when you think about adults, and this is probably true of teenagers too, and kids, you get into certain periods of time in your life where you're like, I just want to be able to finish a story tonight. I just want to read a book tonight, or I just want to read it this week, or I want to read something short, or I want something that's going to be exciting, but not take up a lot of brain space or whatever. So if you have written a shorter book and someone can finish it in 1 or 2 sittings, whereas it's going to take, 4 or 5, I don't know. I usually finish books fast. I don't know if this is unrealistic for you guys. But no, I think comparatively, if you finish it in half the time, that's going to have a market too. And in every 100%. Genre, including fantasy. So it's kind of annoying to me that publishers do kind of average that out. I do think there are a lot of authors that try to write too much. So I understand cutting it back, because I have that problem. I cut words and I'm like, yep, this is better. But I don't think it should have to meet like a minimum word count.
I agree. It drives me crazy. And people are like, well, then publish it as a novella or short story. And that's completely valid. It's just harder to market those, which is really frustrating, because people like me want to pick up a novella or want to pick up like a shorter story that's not like the average YA word count, because I'm very busy, but I love reading. And so I often feel like, to use like one of the popular words these days, I feel like gatekept sometimes from from reading series or from just reading longer books, because I honestly don't have the time of day to do that. And so there is a market for it. So if you're writing your book and you think this is too zany, or this is too out there, this is too short, or this is too long, or the series is too short, the series is too long, there's a market for it. There's a market for everything. Now, trying to convince a literary agent that there's a market for it might be harder or not, depending on, what the circumstances are for your story. But there is a market for everything. And so that might just take you a lot longer to find someone if it's something that's not a huge market, or it might not. You might find the perfect person right away, or you might decide to self-publish if you just can't find anyone who's willing to see the market potential in your book, which is a whole other thing and a lot of work in a lot of other ways. But there is a market for everything. So don't let anyone make you feel like no one would read this. That's not true. Somebody would love to. So even if you read, if this is even true of stuff that I've written that I look back and I'm like, this is crap. And people who read it are like, when are you going to come out with the next one? And I'm like, are you serious?
You like
so bad. But there really is a market for everything, even the stuff that you no longer like. So yeah. So anyways, I would just say, I know we're talking about like short versus long series, but it's not like there's a better one. It's just whatever one it takes to tell your story the best. That's the one you should go with. There's not
you
like
have to know what
right
your story
wrong.
is.
Yeah.
What are you trying to say? What stuff is there naturally versus what are you trying to artificially force?
Yes.
And then decide what's there naturally. How many books? Is it a duology? Is it 10? Yeah. And
exactly.
That's where you're going to, the correct answer is in what's naturally coming to you. You might start writing and then you get more ideas, but you really shouldn't try to force it shorter or longer. This is also something that bothers me about publishing, is that there are certain series that were supposed to be long and then the publisher shortened them because I don't know, they stopped doing well or whatever. But that also really bothers me because if the original story is supposed to be on the longer side, what am I cut? What's being cut that I'm missing now?
Yeah.
And would it have been awesome? Because
probably.
I want to know. I want to know what I'm missing.
Yeah, it's true. I think also a lot of people don't like the idea of doing part 1 and part 2 in a book, but I've seen this a lot where somebody writes a whole duology and then, but the second book, like there really wasn't like a whole book's worth of content. Like there really isn't. It really should have been like a part 1, part 2, like should have been like a really long first book, but everyone knows it's really hard to sell a publisher on a first book. By the way, shout out to my sister because she's trying to FaceTime me and she gets mad when I don't give her a shout out. Anyways, I'll text her. But I think that I wish that people were more okay with doing a part 1 and part 2 in the same book like they used to do. I think that would be excellent because you can naturally like put the book down and stop after part 1 if you need a break before you go on to book 2, but it doesn't waste the whole second book because sometimes you only need like a quarter of the second book or half of the second book to resolve it all. And so I think in that scenario, do a part 1 and part 2 and let your publisher fight it out with you. Like, I don't think you need to try and create more content just to fill a second book.
Right. Especially because I think most writers feel this way. You guys can determine if you do too. I feel like we all just have so many ideas. Why waste time trying to force content for something that isn't there when you could instead be using it to write something new and totally cool?
Seriously, especially if you're writing as an adult, like time is precious. Why are you wasting your time and energy to try and make somebody else like happy with like the length, like the least important aspect of your story? Just write whatever it takes to tell your story the best that your story can be told and move on. And your publisher might fight it out with you. And that's an unfortunate reality of this world. But if your story is truly compelling, a publisher will think that it's worth fighting it out with you. So
true.
Yeah.
And another problem with long series is that for readers, it can be intimidating to see an entire series out that is like 6 books plus. I know true. I love long series, but I was still really intimidated by the idea of reading Throne of Glass. And that's why I've really only read.
That's why I have only read Throne of Glass and I loved it. And then I was like, I don't have the time or money to commit to this whole series and I haven't read any more and it makes me sad.
Right.
But I can't.
Yeah. So it can be intimidating. And at that point, that's when you really need to make sure that book 1 had a strong enough hook that feels like it can go so much deeper that a reader might be able to look at it and say, I think this series could pull it off.
Yes.
And then you get to binge, which is also why I like long series, because that's my favorite thing to do.
I miss binging.
I know it's fun. You seem to like pick a week or a weekend somewhere. Just take vacation time and just read.
It's just to read. That would be amazing. I want to read back through the Marissa Meyer's like Cinder series, like her fairy tale retelling. I want to reread the whole thing so bad all at once because it's so good. But I'm also feel like kind of cheated that I'm just, because I'm on a time crunch I have to finish reading Winter because we're guesting on someone else's pod. And so we have to like read a certain amount of chapters. And so I'm kind of upset because I feel like I'm on a time crunch and I want to just get to enjoy this book because it's so good. So instead I'm half really enjoying it and then half going, wait, what happened in the last book? And it's so upsetting. Yeah. Anyways, that's kind of a tangent, but
that's okay. But I would just say, binging is so great, but you have to be able to trust that the premise from book one is going to hold. And obviously it's going to take different twists and turns, but it's got to remain whoever your book one is appealing to needs to still be the kind of person book 10 will appeal to. Yes. Is really what you have to go for.
Don't change I'm sure your audience.
I'm sure there are series out there that switch things up and maybe it works. I don't know, but think about Game of Thrones if you've read those or some of the longer middle grade series, right?
Yeah.
They maintain that tone and therefore their audience so that someone that's looking at the boxed set or the whole series is, thinking, all of these sound interesting. Yeah. All of these sound good. I want to read these.
Yeah.
Whereas with a duology or trilogy and like a short 4-book series, it's not as much of a commitment. So it might take less to convince them, which also means you can give less away in terms of what they're about, which can be good because then maybe your plot twist works better or whatnot. But it is weird how much marketing is going to play into these decisions.
But don't worry about that now. Worry about that later. Right now you just worry about telling your story the best that your story can be told. And everything else you deal with afterwards because it is annoying and it exists and it's a reality. So we're not going to pretend it doesn't exist. It's just that's part of the next part of your process. The first part is just telling your story as best as you can. I'm curious on a related note to what you're saying before. Do you think that the ACOTAR series changes tone? Because I've kind of disregarded its initial audience because I thought, and I felt like it was initially marketed as a YA book, but I haven't read the whole series, so I don't know.
Just real fast. Also, I got a free Audible trial. It is still being marketed as young adult. I don't know what's going on there.
It's not. I
know. I think it's number 2 on the young adult section of Audible. I'm like, wow, this is not correct.
That is not correct.
No. Anyway, I don't think it changed tone. I think it did change audience. So I've talked about this a little bit. The theme of book 1 does not carry through past book 1. So if you really liked book 1 and you're like, yes, true love, I don't think you're going to like book 2. If you liked book 1, or if you were like middling about book 1, or if you were like, maybe if it went a different direction, I think you would like book 2 because I just think romantically and thematically it goes a completely different way.
So same tone, different audience, but not necessarily different like age audience. Like it's kind of new adult from the start.
Yes, for sure. Okay. But I don't think that people that loved book 1 liked book 2 and vice versa.
I feel like this is an example of the book 1 should have been a standalone, especially because it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling. So like, let that story wrap up and end, and then write a new series that's the rest of them. And then I might have really, really enjoyed it. But I'm just very upset because I know what happens in the rest of the series. So I'm very upset that we went from the story of Beauty and the Beast to somehow try and connect it to this other completely different story, which there are some plot concepts I find quite compelling, but it's just so upsetting. Like this is an example. This should not have all been a series. There should have been a standalone and there should have been a spin-off series.
Yes.
That would have solved like 80 to 90, well, maybe not 90%. That would have solved somewhere around 80% being generous of the issues with that series.
I agree. I just think a lot of it was in Sarah J. Maas is great. I think a lot of the problem was in the execution.
It's so wild to me that they're written by the same person.
It's so different.
Throne of Glass is amazing.
I know.
So it's definitely not anything against Sarah J. Maas. I'm just always confused by that. But I think that's a good example of there is no rule. You can do one standalone, a spin-off, you could do a long series, and then a duology. They could be related, they could not be related, but don't try to connect things that aren't naturally connected.
Yeah, so that's also an interesting point about ACOTAR. So she is now writing more books, right? I think it's a multi-generational thing now. So it's like the children of the characters, but I'm not sure because I'm not reading them. Sometimes I wonder, was this planned from the beginning or did it become so popular that the publisher or readers or whoever put pressure on her to give us more? And does the quality then therefore suffer? Because I'm kind of a purist about this. I feel like the author should kind of be in a vacuum when it comes to their own story. Don't listen to fan theories. Don't look at your reviews. Don't listen to what readers say they want. And I mean, to a degree, like if a lot of readers are like, I would love a prequel, and you're like, well, I kind of have an idea for a prequel that's always been there, so maybe I will. But don't make up a prequel because readers said so, because I just feel like then the tone is different. It's coming from such a different like well of inspiration that I feel like it's going to be really disjointed. And so I don't like that. But I don't know. I mean, authors don't necessarily know upfront. These are all of the ideas I have, and I will do them all, and I will have none after this. But I wonder sometimes if this was her call or someone else's call. And I think that would affect. So like if you're doing a long series because you feel pressured, I mean, by the time you get published and then you feel pressured to lengthen it, I don't like the idea of giving into that and writing more books.
Yeah. Well, I think it's something where like, as a writer, you just like, as someone who identifies as a writer, you really resist the idea of pandering. And so if you're paying attention to reviews and requests or pressure from your publisher because you're pandering for more reads or to sell more books, then the quality is just not going to be there. You just can't fake it like that. And I think that I think it's disingenuous. And I don't think it's very respectful of your readers' time and money and energy. However, I do think that there's kind of a balancing act here where I think listening to what your publisher is saying feedback wise for what people might like to read. And then also because it is a business and it is a job. So if they're saying we can sign you on for this many more books and you're like, well, let me think about it. Always say, let me think about it first. Don't be like, yes, I got it. Because if your story is done and you feel that it's done, and then you're trying to go back and add more things afterwards, and you just don't have like an actual, like good, genuine premise for it, then it's just going to fall apart. So my husband just whacked into my microphone. he just threw you guys a hang loose sign if you're watching. You gonna take a nap? What are you looking for?
He's gonna lay down in the background.
I mean, he could. Sleeping Beauty back there.
No, thank you.
No, thank you. Anyways, bless you. I thought he was gonna sneeze.
No.
Okay. I lost my train of thought. What was I saying?
Something about being disingenuous.
Yeah, I think that it's a balancing act though. So like listen to like what your readers are saying, listen to the reviews, like don't let bad reviews get to you unless like a lot of them are saying the same thing. And listen to your publishers and what they're saying would sell, because it is something that you're doing as a career. And so it is important to keep that kind of stuff in mind, but not to let it rule you. So if your publisher really wants you to do like more books in the series, like say, let me think about it, go home, look over all of the ideas that you have for stories and really think, is there any piece of inspiration that I have, or is any of the things that readers are saying about my book or ideas that they have things about, does any of this inspire me? Is any of this enough inspiration that I could write more and have a genuinely good story that is like of the same level of quality as the initial story? If yes, you think that you can come up with something like that, then go for it. If you're like, I just have nothing, I just have no ideas, it's truly played out, nothing that anyone is saying to me is inspiring in any way, I've got no new ideas for this, don't force it. Don't ruin a good thing. Because then at that point you are just ruining a good thing. But I think that there's a balancing act. I think you don't want to be disingenuous and you don't want to pander, because it's my least favorite thing in the whole world. But it's not bad to know it's marketable, and it's not bad to write more because your publisher asks you for more, if you can actually find a piece of genuine inspiration to go from. So it just depends on a situation by situation basis, but never ever write something or write more just because someone tells you you need to.
Right. I think a good example, what I am assuming, is Suzanne Collins with the Hunger Games, because she just came out with that new book and it's so many years removed from the original trilogy that I feel really confident that it came from her and not like, a bunch of people pressuring her into a story that she didn't have planned. So I haven't read it yet. I don't know if it's any good. Maybe you guys have, but the time difference, because I know that she really hasn't written anything else since Hunger Games. And there was a lot of pressure on her to write stuff after that. And I kind of have a lot of respect for her that she didn't, that she kind of said, this is a story I wanted to tell. I don't know if I have anything else. And then now she does. And I just feel like that's a little more legitimate and I'm more trusting of it.
It feels like kind of like a crapshoot. It feels like a gamble. if someone is coming out with so much stuff so quickly, all in the same vein, it kind of feels like they're just being pressured to do it. And that may or may not be true. Cassandra Clare has a lot of stuff kind of in the same vein, and it's all really good. So that may or may not be the case. She might just have a ton of inspiration, but like, I don't know, when we get a lot of spinoff series from someone and I'm like questionable of the quality, it makes me think if the quality was better in one than in another, it makes me think that one of them was kind of coerced more than it was inspired. So you always want to be inspired, not feel pressured, or wait until you have inspiration, because maybe your publisher's like Susan, you want a book about this, or we want another book about that, and you don't have the inspiration yet. And you say, well, I don't have any inspiration for that right now. I've really thought about it and given it time. I'll get back to you if I do. And then you get inspiration and you write it, and it's great. And it's a different story than it would have been if you tried to force it. So yeah. I
think it's also true that particularly readers sometimes don't know what they want. And I don't mean that to sound patronizing. What I mean is that if you write a series and then you give them too much and they end up not liking the extra stuff you gave them, that can kind of ruin it for them. So I've been noticing that there are a lot of books that I've been reading, book 1 and then book 2. And I'm like, book 2 just didn't feel necessary. This could have been a really good standalone. It would have had to have a more ambiguous ending, right? It would have been more up in the air, more of a, you as the reader kind of decide what you think would happen next. And I think maybe we have too few of those, because I think those can be really fun for readers. I mean, that really gets their imaginations going. It really allows for a lot of fan theories and a lot of discussions, maybe fan fiction and that kind of stuff. Whereas if you provide every single answer, that doesn't leave a lot of room for readers to imagine, and it can kind of ruin their perception of the story if they didn't like the direction you took it. So I think you got to be careful with people saying they want more. Sometimes they don't want more. Sometimes they just want, sometimes they do want more, like, but they don't want concrete answers.
Yeah. Sometimes they want more like more world content, but they don't want a whole nother story. Like they don't want more of that story. They want more of that world. I feel like that's more the differentiation.
Yeah. I mean, if you add too much, because I don't know, I feel like stories where like the couple is already together and then you try to take it past that. So then you like have to create drama, or you have to include new elements to the plot to replace what the romantic drama was, the space it was taking up. I find that I don't like that much. And I think a lot of readers think that they will get one thing, because you all have, when we read a book and it's more ambiguous in the end, we all kind of have our own picture of what's going on afterwards. This kind of happened in the Mirror Visitor series, which I loved, right? The end is a little ambiguous, but I like that there are no concrete answers, because if there were concrete answers, what if I don't like the concrete answer? Then it ruins everything. So it can almost be safer and more fun for readers, for you as a writer, to kind of leave it a little open. That can be hard as a writer, because at least with me, I know that I have very specific knowledge about what happens. And so it can be grating sometimes if people disagree. They're like, well, what if this happened? It's like, no, you're like, well, that doesn't going on. Yeah, that's not what it is. But
I like more ambiguity. I tend to leave a lot more ambiguity in my books.
Yeah. And I think that can be a really good thing. And again, easier to do in short series and long series. It can provide readers more space to think, more space to decide for themselves, more space to write their own kind of ending. And I think that's kind of underdone these days. I think there is a lot of pressure to, if this does well, you have to milk it for all it's worth. But maybe if you just let it sit, you wouldn't ruin it. And I wish that would happen more.
I agree. I think my standalone that I wrote, the magical realism adult fiction, that book, I honestly think it's my most like literary, probably like artistically my best book that I've written. The ending is extremely ambiguous. Like a lot of stuff throughout the book is really ambiguous, because it's got that kind of magical realism vibe where you don't really pin down if something actually is or isn't real, and what all of it means. So the ending is extremely ambiguous, and I think it fits the story amazingly and supports the whole theme of the story really well. But that one specifically, especially because it's a more literary book and the ending is so ambiguous, if I were to add anything to that story, to that world, it would so hugely detract from the impact of the ending. It would collapse the whole thing. So like that is one where it wouldn't matter, I don't think, how much somebody pressured me to try and write more for it. I can't imagine ever doing that. Could it be adapted into a different format, like a short series on television? Yes, because you're putting it in a different format. So it's different because you could retain the tone of ambiguity. But could I write another book? No. Right. It would completely nullify the impact of ending the book that way. So that's one where you just can't. But that's more common for, I feel like, adult fiction or literary fiction than for YA. That doesn't tend to be as much the case. There's generally a lot more spin-off potential for anything that's not like a literary piece of literary fiction.
Well, and too with YA fiction in particular, there's typically a greater lesson at play. And so you want to be a little clearer in the ending to make your lesson clearer sometimes. Not always, but I think that's probably why YA books tend to be a little more concrete in their endings. Yeah. But again, how effective might it be if we stop doing that and we make it a little more open-ended and allow people to think for themselves? I just think that would be really great.
That would be awesome.
The book that I wrote back in January that I'm kind of working on again, it has a very open ending. Like it's a conclusion, but it has an open ending. Kind of like you're saying, like if someone else wanted to interpret past that, I would be open to it. But I want to leave it open because I want other people to have the freedom to do that. Yes. And totally agree. I think that's an underrated thing for writers to do because it's hard. It's hard to give up the control to the readers, even though like you're doing it for them. You're also like, but also you have to think exactly the same way as I do about this. Yes. So it can be hard, but I think ultimately that is more effective.
I totally agree.
So also something to think about, especially if you are wrapping up a series, long or short, you need to conclude it, but you can leave some things in the air and leave them to, it's kind of like, if a character disappears at the end of a series and you're like, we don't know where they went. And, a reader is going to say, but I want to know where they went. Now they can think about where they went. You don't need to know that for the story to end in a satisfying way. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yep. I totally agree. And I think if you think that there will be market potential for more content from your world, leaving a few things unsaid is nice. But obviously still adding a little bit of concrete ending for if there's a chance you might not continue it to because it's a little frustrating to read a whole series and then the ending is ambiguous. Like the longer the series, I feel like the more concrete answers you want. Yeah,
true. That's why I think it's kind of a duology trilogy strategy
really
that should be used.
Yeah, I agree. It really is. Was there anything else that you want to say about long versus short series?
No, that's it. I was kind of a ramble. Hopefully there's something good in there, but
I think a lot of it was good. It's like, I mean, I just this is not series. Like a topic that we bring up very often, but it's very relevant because everyone who's writing is deciding this kind of stuff every day. So I'm glad
I actually have one more point. So if you are starting to write, you don't necessarily have to know the exact number of books it's going to be. No. I definitely felt like I did. So the series that I wrote, it started out as 6. And for a really long time, I just had it in my head. It is 6 books. And that left me very little room to expand. And then when I finally did decide to expand, I was like, well, this is much better because this is just working far better than I thought it was. So don't lock yourself into a number. I feel like if you're like me and you have kind of the analytical brain going on, sometimes it can feel very tempting to just lock yourself into a number, but don't do that. Leave yourself room to eliminate a book if you find out that it's mostly filler and to add them if you have more ideas. So
I agree.
You can think whatever you want when you're writing it, but don't lock yourself in.
I totally agree. Well, do you want to tell us about your writing this week?
Oh my gosh. Yes. So that book that I wrote back in January, I have now returned to it. I already read through it twice and did like edits. There are 3 things I have to change plot wise that I'm going to work on now, but I think I don't want to be cocky and think I caught all of them typo level mistakes, but it feels really solid to me. So I started querying and I sent Ash my query letter and she was very helpful. So
I love working on query letters. It's so fun. So I mean, not working on mine, it's a nightmare to work on mine, but I love working on other people's query letters.
Yes.
It's so exciting.
It is. And I sent it out to 5 agents yesterday. I'm just going to kind of test the waters initially to see how it's received and everything. I did have to write a synopsis for one of them. And it was one of those things where I just thought, I don't need a synopsis yet. I'll do just the query letter stuff. But I found an agent that felt like a really good one to query first. So I was like, okay, I'll write the synopsis now.
I always try and do it when I'm writing my query letter. It kind of feels like my query letter, but it's just longer. It's just It's a nightmare. It's harder than the query letter. It's so hard.
And it's so easy, therefore, to convince yourself you don't need it, but you do.
You really
so
do.
Do it up front. It will make things so easy.
You will. Another hot tip, you guys, because a lot of agents have like these query submission forms now. I might have said this before, but anything you enter into any query letter or submission form, copy and paste it into a document. Because you're going to, at some point, hit that question again. You're going to be like, I wrote the perfect answer and I don't remember it. Now I have to try and write something else. So copy and paste everything and keep track of who you've queried on what dates, because then you can go back and query them again after a certain period of time. Yeah. Anyways.
I'm doing that this time around. I did not do that for the other one. So hopefully this one will go a little smoother. But yeah, so I wrote the synopsis, and I am noticing, I think it's because this is a standalone book. And also, I just think the hook and the premise, whether because it's this book or it's a standalone, is so much catchier. Is that a term? Like, you know, a song is catchy. I just feel like it's a better hook.
Yes. I get
so
that.
I feel like it's just a really appealing. Like, I was reading through my query letter and my synopsis a little bit, but most of my query letter, and I was like, I cannot fathom a human being that would not want to read this book. I was just so confident, and I was like, everyone would want to read this. It sounds so good.
I love it.
So I was very confident, and I still feel pretty good about it. I really do feel like this premise is very marketable, and therefore hopefully we'll get the agent to read on and then love it, and then a publisher to read on and love it. So we'll see. It's been a little easy, and also just by now, with all the querying I've done before, I feel like I know all of the agents, so it just went faster also because I didn't have to do as much research. It was essentially just research of, has anything changed? No? Great.
Yep.
So I don't know, it's been really cool, and now I'm kind of just sitting back waiting for answers, which is always weird, but now I'm reading. So I have that.
Yay.
I got an Audible free trial again. Did I already say that?
Yes.
So I've been listening to some audiobooks, which is because it's been a long time since I've read anything, or because my brain was just so on like write and query, then now it's just kind of relaxing.
That's so nice.
It's been very nice, but querying is stressful, but also really exciting. And I feel like my hopes are too high. There is a part of me that truly believes all 5 of these agents will come back asking for more material.
Yeah.
And they could, but it's probably not likely. And so I'm like, I'm trying so hard to lower my expectations, but they're so stubbornly high right now. So I just need them to reject me so that I can get humbled and respond a little more normally. So we'll see.
It'll happen. It's always the process, but you always have that initial confidence where you're like, nobody wouldn't want this. What kind of crazy person wouldn't want this book? So and that's good, because if you don't have that level of confidence, I don't feel like you should be querying it. So it's good that you have that level of confidence in it.
Yep. So I definitely did less editing on it than my other book, but also I wrote the other book when I was 13, so it just needed more editing. So it's really hard for me to gauge now.
Yes. The last book I wrote, My Space Alien Southerners and Saving the World, which you guys can get on Amazon if you're interested. I definitely did a lot less editing than on my other works, because I didn't write it that long ago. It was pretty recent. I was a lot older. I had like a much better grasp of writing. Is it my best work ever? No. Will I continue to become a better writer? Yes. But I mean, it really only took like a few rounds of editing versus like 20 rounds of editing.
Exactly.
So yeah, also because of the story itself, like it's not like the most like earth-shattering series. So it's not like
it's
the theme is
fun,
not earth-shattering.
not
Yeah, it's supposed
necessarily,
to be fun, not necessarily like the deepest thing you've ever read. I think it's satisfying, but it's not like something really intense. So it just didn't require the same amount of work, which was quite nice actually.
Yeah. But yeah, so I'm excited about that. That's been my writing update, I guess. What about you?
So I'm kind of going through what I realized is like a reading phase, because you were saying you go through like reading and writing phases. So do I, but because I read for That Pretentious Book Club, our sister podcast, every week, I guess I didn't really notice that I'd been in a reading phase. But so for me, a reading phase basically means I'll read like an extra book on top of what I'm reading for the week, or a couple extra books. And of course, it takes me a long time to get through reading multiple books at once. but
Mhm.
I'm also like, I'm reading to comprehend, not just reading to try and get done with my reading for the week. And so
Mhm.
that's kind of what my reading phase has become, like an actual, like
Yeah.
really into what I'm reading phase. And so that's kind of what I'm in now too, which is making it really hard to write. But also I got these 2 nonfiction books. So that's part of it too, is I'm trying to read through these nonfiction books, which I've mentioned before, because I think that they're going to kind of give me a clearer idea of some of the themes I'm trying to communicate in the book I'm rewriting right now. So I am like more than halfway done with one of the books. So I'm close. I'm on the way. And that book is still, because I wrote it, I think I wrote it around when I wrote my like adult fiction one. So like the quality isn't terrible, but because I put a lot less thought into the quality of it, because it's a YA fantasy. So like there's not as much, you have to be very careful in a 50,000 word adult book. Like everything has to be perfect, but it feels like you can slide with stuff when you're doing like a YA fantasy. Guess what? You can't. You still have to care about the quality. And so now I'm trying to like go back and make it excellent. But also I have like the theme has become a lot clearer since then. And also I sat down and I planned out the whole series. I actually think it's going to be a 4-book series, which I've never done before. But so now that means, because I wrote the first book and then I plotted out the rest of the series, now I have to go back in and try and write some content back in and write some like structure back into it that I didn't know I was going to want. So it's just taking me a really long time. I just want to be done with it. My goal, knock on wood, is to be done rewriting this by Christmas, which feels very generous because it's August right now. But with all of the other things going on in my life and the fact that I want this to be as perfect as it can get. Like I want the quality to be doubled what it was before. And it wasn't bad before. So I feel like if I can double the quality, I'm going to be in a really good place to query it. Because I also, the same thing, I kind of think the hook for this is stronger for a publisher than some of my other stuff that I've written. Definitely than my Space Alien Southerners and Saving the World book, which is absolutely no hook for a publisher, but hook for lots of people who like funny, like rom-com, sci-fi adventure, YA new adult books. But it's a smaller market, so I did that one myself.
I was gonna say, everything you just said is like the most niche thing I could possibly imagine.
But there is a market for it, but it is so narrow that I wasn't gonna try and convince a publisher for my like premiere book to take it. So anyways, but this book that I'm rewriting, I'm also putting so much effort into, because I think a publisher would like the premise. And I had, when I queried it before, when it was like not even nearly as high quality and I hadn't had the whole series planned out, I still got some requests for partials.
Yeah, you got a lot of interest.
I got a lot of interest for this, more than anything else. And that was when it was like, you know, I'm hoping the quality will be doubled by December. So I'm hoping for more luck, but we'll see, because then the other big factor is trends change. So maybe things won't be as trendy now as when I was querying it the first time. I don't know. So we'll see. It's progress. It just not seeing word count go up doesn't feel like progress, but it is progress. It just is killing me.
It's how progress slow is just killing me.
It's progress. It just feels so slow that it's killing me. And I am someone who loves to check boxes and like check that off the list and check that off the list. I love finishing projects. And so it like, I die a little bit inside every time I work on it, but the word count doesn't change. Because it's not about word count. It's just that I know about how many words I think it's going to take to tell the story. And so I know where I need to get. And I also, because I'm rewriting, I'm like, I have this many pages left to rewrite. So, or to do something with. I think I can also go cut a lot of them out. But I'm also really, really burnt out, like just from life, which I've been like, wow, I'm so good at resting and balancing. And I have been doing a lot better. But like, I need like a hardcore, like sabbatical from the real world for like a whole week would be amazing. A few days would be just fine. So I'm trying to like find time to like, even just go stay at like a cheap hotel for like a day or two and just like just not have the farm, not have all the jobs to work on, and just get to like, even just sleep. Much less get to like write. If I had a whole week, I could sleep and write, and I would get so much done and I'd feel so refreshed. But for just a day or two, I could just sleep and it would be awesome. So I'm approaching burnout really quickly. So I'm trying not to guilt myself on top of burnout, because then I'm going to hit burnout faster and longer if I keep trying to push myself. So I'm trying to be happy with the fact that I'm reading these books, and that alone is progress. And I'm still thinking about my book all the time, and that is also progress. So, so I'm stressed because I want this book to be done, because I think it will be very good. But I think realistically, like, I think I could get it rewritten by December.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is kind of like I get into like these weird, like I said, phases. They're like, I'll be writing something and I'm like, I am obsessed. It needs to be perfect. And then once I feel like it's in a good place, I just immediately go down. I'm like, gosh, I'm so burnt out. How long have I felt this way?
Yeah.
And so
the pressure is intense.
Yes. And I get it. And I want to tell you, Ash, that the right thing to do is to give yourself time and space and relax. But I also know that I would not take that advice.
No,
I can't. It's not possible for me to get my own books out of my brain. So I get it. I really, the advice I'm going to give you is bad advice, but just keep plugging
away. Keep working on it little by little. And it is so little by little. Maybe this weekend, we'll see. We were supposed to, I would like to just pick it up and just like keep getting a little bit done, because basically after this rewrite, I'm going to have to do a whole kind of rewrite again from the start, because this has just been basically removing stuff that doesn't need to be there and clarifying the plot. So it means I'm gonna have to go back through again to make sure everything, it has all of this like plot holes that I found this time through, all the new kind of stuff I want to add in as far as structure goes for the rest of the series. So it's going to be like another rewrite on top of that. I think that I can get all of that done by December. So that means the stuff that's easy, like going through now and just kind of like trimming stuff out that needs to go out and kind of like making things consistent. I feel like I could be doing that now. I just need to actually make myself do it. Like maybe this weekend, we'll see. We were supposed to go camping, but it is insanely hot. So our friend who went camping last week was like, don't do it. And we were like, I guess we won't do it. So,
we should take her word or his word for it.
Maybe we should not do that. So maybe we'll see. Maybe I'll do that this weekend instead.
Yeah.
But that's my pseudo writing update, pseudo writing rant.
Cool. Also, now that you mentioned the weather, it finally rained here, and it rained so much, like our backyard partially flooded. It was wonderful.
That sounds so nice. We've had rain like once this summer.
Yeah, this was like, basically our big rain. Yeah. So
it's upsetting. Usually here we get we get a lot of storms in the spring usually, but we didn't even get that many this year. And then the summer, we usually get like rain like every couple weeks. It's been
a really dry year, but it's kind of like the sky was just holding it all in reserve and then just poured it out in one.
It was like, here you go, enjoy. We just
wanted
to be really
keeping
special.
And it was great, because it was when I was finishing up my edit of the book, and it's raining in the scene. And I was like, this is perfection.
That's amazing. God, that's so cathartic. How satisfying. Yes. That's fantastic. So, well, is there anything else we want to share with the listeners?
Nope.
Okay.
I'm good.
Well, guys, we will be back next week with another writing topic. If you guys have suggestions for something you want us to talk about on the pod, that is something you're struggling with or have struggled with or just want to chat about, you can message those suggestions to us on social media. We're on TikTok and Instagram. We are the Scripturient Society, or you can email our production company at contact@storysirenstudio.com. You can also go to storysirenstudio.com and see all of our cool merch. If you want to support the pod, you could also support us on Patreon or leave a comment on Patreon, even without signing up, which is perfectly fine. Our videos are on YouTube. If you guys want to see us, I never really mentioned that, but we're on YouTube. You can look up the Scripturient Society or Story Siren Studio. It should all be there. All of our episodes are up. And I think that's everything. I think I just wrapped it up better than usual.
Yeah, good job.
Go me. I'm trying to be more concise, you see?
Yes.
I'm really trying to be
very
concise.
Important.
Yeah. Anyway, so go follow us on the social, check us out, chat with us. We'll be back next week per usual. And until then, keep writing.
And we'll see you on the next page.